You're listening to Productivity Protected, the podcast that's all about data privacy and security. We'll unpack emerging threats, hot issues in data security, and top ways to protect your data and how you work. Here's your host, Spencer Kupferman.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to the Productivity Protected podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Kupferman. Welcome back here. We've got a fantastic episode, one I've been wanting to do for months. I'm glad we finally got to it. This is learning from the top women in tech leadership. Women in tech leadership. We're here with two fantastic leaders who I'm excited to be with here today. They've got some great stories and content to share. We have so many aspiring young women out there who want to get into leadership roles, and these are two great role models and mentors who can give guidance to that here. And I'm just excited to be able to finally have gotten to this particular podcast. I want to take a moment out, if I can, to welcome all of our listeners around the globe. Thank you for continuing to tune in here to Productivity Protected. Let me first introduce a very special guest, Milena Gacheva. Milena is a data executive with over 15 years of experience spanning several industries, such as financial services, including banking, insurance, asset management, retail, and professional services. She's built enterprise data strategy around activating data governance, standing up metadata management, and also the underpinning of outcomes by architecting the end-to-end automation through industry's best tools. Milena held various positions at E&Y, Deloitte. During her consulting tenure, she's presented and authored numerous professional points of views on data strategy, master data management, data design and architecture, data privacy solutions, data governance, activation, operations, try and say that 7 times fast, as well as metadata strategy. Milena has an extensive experience advising enterprise executives on strategy and executing hands-on experience in data management, architecture, governance, data transformation, and solution development. She's dedicated to enabling business capabilities through continuous improvement on data, processes, technologies. Her past track record has proven success through her leadership and design of strategies, business cases, multi-year roadmaps, and various solutions. Milena, I want to welcome you here to the Productivity Protected podcast. Here, we're in Women in Tech Leadership. We couldn't think of inviting a more accomplished women in tech leadership. We're so excited to have you today. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Spencer. It's really great honor to be a part of the podcast. I'm excited that our timing schedule finally worked. So I'm super looking forward to today's discussion. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And we're looking forward to jumping here shortly. But before we do, I want to introduce our next very special guest. Many of you, of course, those in the PKWARE audience and our customers are very familiar with this face and this name, Tonya Cannady, who actually is the president and Chief Revenue Officer here at PKWARE. Tonya and I, for those of you who know, Tonya and I go way back. I almost feel it's almost inappropriate for me to read anything about Tonya. I've known Tonya for almost half of my life. So that's and worked with her for about that long as well. So I'm gonna give him my best to do this introduction justice here. I'll read a little bit, Tonya. I hope you'll forgive me for reading a little bit of it, and I'll ad-lib as well. But Tonya has over 20 years of experience in building and leading global sales organizations and commercial organizations in the software field. As PKWARE's president and CRO, Tonya oversees all commercial channels for the company, including global sales, customer success, sales enablement, business development. Really, Tonya's role is what I like to view as really handling the entire customer journey, if you will, from the moment someone becomes potentially a prospect of PKWARE to the moment that they sign up with PKWARE and partner with us, and all through their journey as a customer. So that entire customer experience is really in Tonya's bailiwick, something she's developed a lot of tremendous skills and processes around over the years. Prior to PKWARE, Tonya led and executed Insight Softwares, of course, formerly Global Softwares, should be a familiar company to many of those in the audience. Their worldwide sales teams, growth objectives through direct and indirect sales channels. She also led the company to unprecedented growth by establishing end-to-end sales execution, launching and managing joint development initiatives between technology companies, and establishing very important and strategic ecosystem partnerships. Did a fantastic job of that while I was leading Global Software. And Tonya is no stranger to the private equity game. Those who know PKWARE know that we are a private equity backed, majority-owned software business. Tonya has been through her share of private equity transactions, having helped lead the Thompson Street Capital Partners acquisition and TA Associates as well. So a lot of familiarity with the private equity world. And before her time, even at Insight Software and Global, Tonya was president of DB Basics. Those who are in the Research Triangle region might know DB Basics as an Oracle and Microsoft technology training and consulting organization, where she led that company through an acquisition by a publicly traded corporation and managed the integration post-acquisition. And in her free time, Tonya loves being outdoors, boating, fishing, snow skiing. She's not a bad golfer. I know we got a lot of golfers who listen in here. Tonya is a native of North Carolina. She went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. That is the Tar Heel State and the Tar Heel University. So to her, there are no other universities in the entire state. So Tonya, I think, like I said, if we go back, we were recruiting Tonya back in the early 2000s, maybe 2002, 2003. I actually lived down the street, grew up. I didn't live. I grew up down the street from Tonya's husband, actually 6 or 7 houses down for about 10 years of my life. So all sorts of connections between Tonya and I. So glad she's here. Glad she's leading us at PKWARE as our president and CRO. Tonya Cannady, finally, welcome to the Productivity Protected podcast.
Thank you, Spencer. I'm really honored and flattered with that introduction. And you're right, I bleed blue. As much as you hate to say that and announce it, he's a native NC State fan, I think, in our backyard. So anyway, I appreciate the opportunity. Really looking forward to also learning from Milena. I'd can't wait to hear your feedback along the way. So this is fantastic.
That's awesome. I'm glad you're finally here, and Milena's finally here, and we're all here together. This is great. We're all here together to talk about women in tech leadership. As I said earlier, we've got two fantastic ones here for us to learn from today. Let me start. Let's jump right into these questions. According to a project that was part of a National Institute of Standards and Technology, the NIST program, NIST program, there are more than 1 million people employed in cybersecurity in the United States alone. That's a lot, actually. That statistic actually surprised me. That's a lot of human beings in one market, in what's considered to be basically kind of a new market, talking about the last 15, 20 years here, where it really started to ramp up. But okay, let's say that's accurate. There's 1 million in the United States, and only a quarter of that workforce are women. I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about how you, Milena, got into technology, into cyber privacy, data governance, really all of these. There's so many different things you do, as we learned from your bio, so many different roles that you've played in your journey. Could you maybe share with our listeners a little about your journey and how you got into this whole cyber data governance program?
Thank you, Spencer. Really interesting question. Numbers speak thousands of a volume, right? So To say that cybersecurity is a new thing, I think it's actually, somewhat incorrect. In general, the overall data industry is somewhat new, right? Like, we've always thought about, the business side and the technical side, and there's never really a middle ground. So data in general is sort of like it's a new thing, right? In the past, it used to be like this ugly stepchild that everybody thought that it could be like off the side and maybe handed off to technology in some shape or form. Data governance being probably the best example. It was never really thought of as a necessity in an organization. Surprisingly, I still see some organizations out there that are either just starting on their data governance and data management journey, or it doesn't even exist. Like, they're still thinking that, hey, I can get away with, just handing that thing to the IT folks, like they can deal with that, right? And so, as a new industry, it's got its own kind of growing pains, right? All of us are still trying to figure out how this new machine is working as we're trying to build it. There's no right way of doing it. Some would argue that we've discovered some wrong ways of doing it. Privacy laws, I think if we can take some of those as an example, I'm sure, listeners don't need me to dive into the details of the Google fines and the Marriott fines and like the loss of privacy data and all that kind of stuff. So as a new industry, I mean, we're still figuring it out. And in terms of my own personal, experience, I never actually meant to be in technology and data. I actually graduated finance. So that kind of happened by mistake. Maybe to some extent, just like the industry kind of figuring out, oh, wait, we actually need data. I was kind of like in the same thing. And I was like, wait a minute, I've always liked technology. I graduated finance, and I did end up with, being somewhere in the middle. So the way I thought about it and how I ended up in this is I've always wanted to be in the kitchen of things. I've always wanted to be in a place where the decisions are made and you get the insights and you get the understanding of things. And truly, that's what data provides. As a female, it's a great opportunity, not just to learn the way the business is being ran, but also the way the decisions are being made. What's the underpinning, decision factor, whether it's going to happen through analytics, whether it's going to happen through accountability and data, or it's going to happen in just understanding your data footprint. So it's an interesting statistic, and in terms of why is it only a quarter of the women into that space, I honestly can't speak really to like the larger statistics, but for me, it took a little bit to kind of warm up to this, right? Like, this is kind of like a new thing. Nobody really knows about it. So maybe that's why things are a little bit slow, but that's just my point of view.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that, Milena. And I want to, if we can, I want to drill down on that a little bit. I want to know, I guess, two things from that, which I think would be valuable for our listening community. Number one is were there any specific challenges? I mentioned Bulgaria. Of course, you grew up there, spent time there. Curious if being in a different country posed any type of obstacles for a woman to break into tech leadership the way you have. That would be one of the questions there. And then, was there a mentor? Was there a teacher? Was there someone special that inspired you to say, you know what, I really, this isn't the way I initially drew it up, but now that I'm here and I see what's happening, this individual, I want to be like that one day. Was there a woman or a man or somebody that really kind of brought it out in you? Those two questions, I think people would love to hear that.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I did have quite a bit of things working against me, right? For one, I'm a woman, right? And for second, I'm an immigrant. So coming here from college, for college many years ago, which shall remain untold, it was challenging. Bulgaria is on a different track when it comes to economic development and how we think about data and technology. than the U.S. And, you know, I gotta say, but even in the U.S., there's still like this sort of like an expectation, I kind of feel like, where women are supposed to stay at home. We're supposed to just take care of the family, take care of the kids, you know, and all that kinds of stuff. We're slowly coming out of that. And I think this is probably one of the silver linings out of this whole pandemic. It's like when people understood that you don't have to do just one thing. You can do actually more than one thing at the same time. And that's going to be taking care of your household and having a career at the same time. But, you know, for me, the challenge was not only I was, you know, kind of profiled into like this space where the expectation was, you know, to kind of have a family and all that kinds of stuff. But at the same time, the fact that I was international, so believe it or not, my accent has gone a long way. I've had my fair share of like blank stares when I first arrived from Bulgaria, not to mention that I was schooled to speak British English, not American, so there are differences, different podcasts probably. However, these were some of the obstacles, and to your point, I would not have been able to get through them without my mentors. And my top and always top mentors will always be my parents. I'm very close to them. They've been, you know, my rock for all of my success. Of course, I've had other mentors along the way once I kind of got a grip on my career. Some of them male, some of them female. But, you know, on a personal note, I grew up in a family where if mom said no, then dad is likely going to say no as well, and the other way around. Like, I wasn't one of those parents where it's like, you know, mom makes decisions on this and dad is on this. Like, we always work together. So, you know, when I said that things happened for me by mistake, graduated finance, I actually got my first finance job. And 2 weeks into it, I called back home and I said, look, I made a mistake. This has been 4 years in the making, and I really hate it. I hate my life. Like, what can I do? And it was amazing because, again, both of my parents were like, look, if it isn't working, what is going to work, right? And going back to the flip of that, you know, everything coming new in like this industry with data and data management, we know that the old approach isn't working. We know that just having tech and just having business is not going to work. So what is going to work? Right? Like having that middle ground of like data management, whether it's going to be, you know, the architecture design of it or like the management of it, it doesn't matter, right? Like what is going to work? So I think, yes, mentors are important, but most importantly, pivoting. When you figure out that it's not working, learn to slow down and regroup rather than give up on the race. I would think that's probably the most important.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome, Milena. That's a great story, and all the different obstacles. I mean, of course, all of our journeys have obstacles. Being an international student and coming over here presents its own, you know, with language barriers, presents its own set of challenges, that in of itself, not to mention actually finding something that you really feel you could be a master of your craft in. And so many times we go to college, we study something, we end up coming out and we say, actually, I don't really love doing this. So I got to figure out, and like you said, I got to pivot. And so that's a great message, I think, for all those out there, is being able to be giving yourself optionality and know that it's not a dead end. You could change your career. You could pivot in your career at any moment, at any time. And that's what you did, and put you on a different path. And here you are. So that's thank you for sharing that. TC, I'm coming your way here with, I guess, how does Tonya Cannady, with her own set of challenges, of course, not from Bulgaria, but from a really small rural town called Richlands, for those North Carolinians or Southern folks who live in the southern part of the United States of America, a town that's got 1,500 inhabitants, maybe one or two stoplights at the most. You know, that type of upbringing, making that journey like you've made to become the president of PKWARE now. I mean, there must have been some really meaningful, frustrating obstacles for you. Clearly, you've overcome them. Would you share some of that with the audience? And of course, if there's a mentor, someone who inspired you in technology or outside of technology, who just really gave you the strength to, go out and capture what it is that your heart had set out to capture. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, we'll do. Yes. And officially there's one stoplight remaining in Richlands, North Carolina. So, where I grew up very, very small town, and manual labor was definitely required to, pay the bills and make ends meet. Right. So that is something that was distilled in me very, very early on. You may not be the smartest person in the room, but, who's going to outwork you? It's hard to beat somebody if they don't give up. Right. So my journey was a bit unpredictable, in terms of just getting into tech leadership in general. I wasn't intentional, kind of like Milena, as you mentioned, wasn't intentional in beginning my tech journey out of the gate. It's something that I discovered and I ultimately grew to love. And I think anybody that knows me, they know that I love an Excel spreadsheet and a pivot table. I get so excited about those things, right? So, and there's something about technology that it just brings order to life. And so that's something that I truly appreciate. And so my first gig in sales, this is a long and windy story, but my first gig in sales, it started in the telecom industry, and it was in the eastern part of North Carolina. August heat, 98 degrees, 100% humidity. And you were, as a female, you were required to wear hose during the summer in order for you to conduct your job in eastern North Carolina. And this is literally cold calling, door-to-door canvassing of business. And you're trying to sell them long distance services, right? That's when companies actually were paying by the minute and were being charged by the minute to, I'm dating myself to basically make a phone call. So that's where I started. And then about a year later, I got into, as Spencer alluded to, a custom software development company. And that's, I got to that point and never looked back. And so from that point, software became, I'd say, part of my DNA, and it's just something that I absolutely gravitated toward and absolutely appreciate. And I know you had a couple other questions, Spencer, in there, so I might be jumping around, but from a leadership perspective and a mentorship perspective, there's one gentleman, and this, that I witnessed in building the global software company, which I spent 17 years of my career in. And it's the gentleman by the name of Ron Kupferman, who I say he's this quiet strength when he enters the room. And just, maybe it wasn't so much about the technology, but it's more about being a leader and a human being that can be successful, but keep priorities intact and keep employees feeling like they're part of the equation, so those would be the pieces I'd take away from that.
That's great. That's great. I am familiar with Ron Kupferman. He just so happens to be my father. And I'm hoping he's tuning in here. Hi, Dad. Hope you're tuning in here. Tonya just gave you a big shout out there. So hope that made your day. But that's a great beginning. And the one thing that struck me there, TC, was the 100% humidity that I'm very familiar with growing up in North Carolina, as I did, and what that did to our hair. That was really the biggest problem. Was the hair. Of course, I don't have that problem now. I live in South Florida, and the humidity does nothing to my hair. I'm proud to say it does zero to my hair now. And so I know that was a serious consideration of working in that telecommunications job there, and then on to DV Basics. So those are great answers. Let's keep going here so we can make time. TC, I'm sticking with you here on this one. So the statistics are shockingly similar for women in leadership roles. Women hold only roughly 23% of the leadership executive roles, and technology is actually an industry where that leadership number is the lowest, at roughly 19 or 20%. Like I said, TC, we'll start with you, and then Milena, I'm going to let you chime in on this one as well. I guess, you mentioned it. Actually, both of you mentioned that tech leadership wasn't necessarily early on in your career something you had both aspired to. But I guess how is those? So two things. One is I'm going to give you a shot, TC, at telling the audience, how do we enhance that 20%, 25% number? I've always, and because you've worked with me for 2 decades, I've always surrounded myself with smart, powerful women. And I don't know if it's just because my mother's a smart, powerful woman, and that's what I'm used to around me. I don't know. I've always naturally done it. I didn't have to read a statistic and say, well, I need to put women in positions of power and influence, because I always have. So, and my father always has. Maybe that was it. Maybe I always took my cues from my mentor as well. And he always put the best person for the job in the role. And if it was a woman, then so be it. And proudly so. What do you think changes the dial there? What moves the needle for women in technology? I'd like to say that needle's moving right now. Is there anything that sticks out to you right now that you think would move the needle more than maybe historically than it's moved? Tonya, why don't we start there?
Well, I think it's just, if everyone focuses on their individual situation and the individual contribution that they may be making to their own organization, that's a multiplier, and what I mean is finding those individuals that just from the ground up, that you see their contribution, they're self-starters, they're looking for opportunities to expand and grow, and making sure that you're aware of that and being intentional in seeking out those young females that are displaying those attributes, right? I mean, that to me is, it's not easy. I don't think it's easy in today's world, but oftentimes when you hear of internal office politics, it's women that sometimes are beating each other up a little bit, more so than what you might see with male counterparts, and not to make it completely gender specific, but that is the component of this podcast. It is around that. And I think just making sure that you're taking that opportunity, investing that extra 5 minutes or 10 minutes to teach someone or show someone or explain someone that maybe is not raising their hands because they may be uncomfortable in doing that. That's the piece. It's just slowing down to recognize and find those opportunities. I think it's really, really critical. For me, seeing that individual evolve and flourish, it's so motivating, so whether it's just as much about the technology and more so I say about the people and seeing how they grow and evolve for me personally. And we've seen that, too, as well, with our individual contributors actually growing and evolving to now being leaders within our company that are setting the strategy for the organization.
I think that's a very thoughtful way to look at it. For me, hit the nail on the head there. It's finding those real diamonds in the rough there and sticking with them, giving them a platform to express themselves and grow and spread their wings. I know we've done that over and over at PKWARE, at Global, at Insight Software, et cetera, over the years. So I think that's something, and you're a product of that, and that's why you know it well. Somebody did that for you, and I think that does absolutely move the needle. Milena, I'd love to hear you weigh in on that.
Absolutely. So I think this is multiple sort of factors that we're dealing with here, right? I think probably the most important one is the fact that I think us as a society, we're still very much deep into the profiling, right? The whole notion of unconscious bias, it's very real. It's very real, and as much as all of us would like to come out and say, oh, I don't see color and I don't see religion and I don't see, gender and like any of that stuff. We can't help it. And so I've taken multiple courses in like how you approach all that stuff. And I think this is probably going to be the crux as we're, growing as a society, to stop profiling and expecting things of people based on their look, based on, their religious background or like any of that stuff. I feel like we're all different. We're all in this together. We all bring different things to the table. And I personally feel like in any of the teams that I built, the only reason we're successful is because we do come to the table with our best foot forward. So I think that's probably, one of the most important things. And in all of my teams, I encourage that specific kind of thinking. But when it comes to leadership, I think it even gets even more complicated than that. Recently, I think it was about a week or something like that ago, I read an article and it said that the U.S. soccer team are the first ones that came out and said that now women and men are going to be paid the same price, right? Like they're all going to be making the same. Which made me think, I'm like, soccer is probably like one of the oldest sports out there, right? And so we're in 2022 and finally somebody has caught up to the fact that, men and women should be probably making the same salary. Sadly, this is not what I see in a lot of the executive levels. There's still the expectation that as a guy, as a male, you've got more to give, so you should be paid better. And at the end of the day, I am involved in plenty of conversations where male and female, we all pull our own weight. And, that doesn't necessarily, make me feel good that my male counterparts are making more than me. And so you put that in a combination with the fact that executive leadership, management, or any kind of leadership, human leadership role, people leadership role, comes with its own pressures, right? This is not about what you can deliver. This is about the entire team now. And, you have responsibility not just for the organization, but now you have responsibility for those individuals as well. And so, I think oftentimes us women tend to stay away from some of those executive roles is, a little bit kind of like, well, look, I'm going to be going under the same pressure as my male counterparts, and I'm going to be pulling the same hours and the same craziness, but I'll be making less. And it's like, well, why do I want to do that? Right? Like, I understand that some of it is like, I'll get the better recognition, I'll get the better exposure and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, the numbers don't up, right? They don't add up. So in terms of like, your question was, what can we do to stimulate, that a little bit better? For one, it's going to be, really tackling that, unconscious bias, really being aware of those things, going to more courses, speaking to more people, and, trying to tackle that. And so two, equality, really. I mean, if I'm going to have the same responsibility as my male counterparts, pay me the same. Simple as that. So that's probably the second biggest thing for me. And last but not least, it's this whole idea and notion, and I'm still hearing it from some places. It's like, oh, guys are better in some roles and, female are better in other roles. And it comes from like the whole hunter and gatherer thing, because male are better able to concentrate on one thing and us women are like more on the horizontal thing. It's like, maybe it's true, but maybe it isn't. Like, you can't really know a person on like those things. And that's why I hear some of those things like, oh, technology is better for male because it really needs it to be like very specific into one specific area, really good at it. And like women are just too thin spread out. I don't know. I've worked with plenty of female in technology where I got to tell you, they fare much better as compared to their male counterparts. So yeah, that's some of those unconscious biases that I think should be broken.
I appreciate the candor and feedback, Milena, and of course, Tonya, and your thoughts. I don't know. In my house, my wife is way more tech savvy and tech centric than I am. So I think whoever said that's wrong. I really do. I don't know that men are better in technology. The women, I don't subscribe to that. I'm living proof. I'm just I'm just not as good as my wife in technology. I'm really not. So I'm not afraid to say that she's more technically inclined than I am. One more question for our special guest here, and I guess a lot's been said here about women in tech, challenges you both have faced and overcome, how we can try to improve those statistics that I quoted here that we've talked about, thoughtful commentary from both of you. And we appreciate that. Our listeners, I'm sure I'm speaking for them, but I'm sure they appreciate that. In conclusion, what advice would you both? We'll start with Tonya on this one, and then finish with Milena. What advice would you offer a young woman coming up in the space, looking to make their way in this tech world that we live in, what would you recommend they do to try to get to where you all have accomplished with great successes? TC?
Yeah, something I forgot to mention when you were asking me about the journey is with regard to the challenge, and it would be, I had an SVP of the organization tell me that, you're not really cut out for sales. This is, we'll give you a shot, but you're not going to be successful doing this. And 6 months after hearing those words, I was number 1 in the region and then number 5 in the country. So what that means is, if anyone ever tells you that you can't do something, accept that as a challenge for you to overcome and prove them wrong. That first and foremost is very, very formative. And that does speak to the hard work and not quitting aspect of things. From just in terms of the industry specifically, I was newer coming into cybersecurity, and it's amazing the amount of podcasts like this one we're listening to today, or we're creating today, but that are dedicated to technology as well as cybersecurity specifically. So if you are willing to commit the time and become a student, leveraging all the forum and the technology that is out there to not only educate but to network, there's tons of information out there that's available. So that would be the secondarily, other than just making sure that you stay focused, but become a student and leverage the technology and the collateral and content that's available.
That's great, TC. Thanks for that. Milena, what do you say?
Yeah, I'd like to second that opinion. Really, the most important thing, the name of the game is like literally not to give up. Pivot if it's not working. Understand. I would say be honest with yourself, right? Like don't just do things because the society expects you, your family expects you. Truly, if it makes you miserable, then pivot, turn, do something else, right? And I think that's the most important thing. And then second, I would say for us as women in the corporate world, in technology, right? Know that it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a choice, right? You don't have to make a choice between raising a family or having a career. There is a way to do it simultaneously. And there's, even if it's slow, the industry and the way of thinking is shifting. There's more and more opportunities, more companies that are offering, flexible hours. Especially as I mentioned, silver lining from this 2020. I think everyone came to the aha moment that you really can work from home and you can be just as productive, maybe even more so, because you don't have to be stuck in traffic for 2 hours a day. So take advantage of that. Understand what makes you happy, whether it's technology, whether it's business, whether it's gardening, it doesn't matter, right? Because if it doesn't make you happy, it's just going to be a painful day-to-day existence. And then don't give up on that. Don't give up and, understand that it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful from both of you. Powerful advice. I hope it's not just the women who are listening to that advice. I'd actually like that advice for all the young men out there. Be honest with yourself. I know I found in my career, when people have told me that I couldn't do X, Y, or Z, there was a dozen business schools that rejected me when I was coming out of undergraduate, because my GMAT scores weren't high enough, for whatever the reasons. A dozen of them wouldn't allow me into their school, and it was one of the best things that ever happened to me, being able to be rejected like that. There's a saying about rejection, where it's like rejection is God's protection, and then you're in a way that someone's protecting you from something that was not going to be a good experience, and focusing yourself in another direction, aiming your efforts and your spirit and your soul into a different direction, because you've been rejected in one area. And so that now has forced you to make a different move. And now that move is the experience that brings you to the next level. So all of these are great messages for everybody out there, for all of our listeners. We're up on time here, and I appreciate both Tonya and Milena being so generous here with their time. Great to finally have you on as a guest here on the Productivity Protected podcast. Women in tech leadership. I couldn't think of two people more deserving of sharing this time and commentary with our listeners. So first, I just want to thank Tonya Cannady, President and CRO at PKWARE, for being one of our special guests here on Women in Tech Leadership. TC, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Spencer. This has been awesome. It's been a really rewarding experience. I appreciate it.
And Milena, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us, and being the partner you are, and everything that you're doing out there in the market, and looking forward to continuing to work with you and have you on as a guest again here. Maybe not about women in tech leadership, maybe about data governance, maybe about another topic that we can put together. Thank you for making time this summer. I know you're busy and with all that you have going on, but it's been great having you. Thank you for sharing the commentary with our listeners. I know they really enjoyed it.
Absolutely, Spencer. Again, thank you for the opportunity. This has been a great learning experience for me as well. Would love to join you again anytime. Just let me know. Awesome.
That's awesome. We're gonna sign off here. Thanks again. I want to thank all of our listeners around the globe for joining us here on the Productivity Protected podcast. Women in Tech Leadership. You heard it right here from Tonya Cannady, Milena Gacheva. Don't give up. Don't just do what everybody else does. Be able to pivot. Some awesome messages here. Awesome obstacles. Great spirit to get to where they have gotten to in their careers. Of course, this is the beginning for both of these very talented women. We'll be reading about them and learning about them for years to come in our space. But do one thing, continue to tune in here to the Productivity Protected podcast. Got an awesome guest for our next episode. Now, you know me, I'm not going to tell you who that guest is here. I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to check us out. You're going to have to check us out and be here to tune in to the Productivity Protected podcast. I'm Spencer Kupferman, your host. Thanks again for another great episode.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Productivity Protected. Learn more about how PKWARE protects data and workflows by visiting pkware.com, and join us next time for more insider info on protecting data wherever it lives and moves.